and let you know that I've But no, I was just like, of all the Saturdays, the Saturdays.
It's always the
Sod's
wine.
law.
Absolute sod's law.
I hit myself.
I love that you guys greet the potential audience, whereas I'm just like, hey, it's begun. That's a good enough welcome. That's fine. I want to blame social awkwardness, but I've been doing these enough now that I don't have that excuse, and I have to be honest, and it is just laziness. I just go, right, we're here now. We've been chatting behind the scenes. Let's go. You know? Also, I've done that twice now in as many minutes. So if you're not sure what kind of energy Hannah's bringing to the table today,
Shall we
That's
make
the
it
energy.
into a drinking game?
Is that fancy water? Just water, really fancy?
it's in a cider glass.
It's water in an old moot cider glass I stole from a pub in Preston.
Love that.
We've literally
I
got
stole it
someone
on a night out when I was 19, and I put it into a very small handbag that could literally, it is this big, the handbag, and this wide. And I took it into the club, and it didn't smash. And I'm now 24, and here we are, and I use it every day.
I love that. I have a Stella Artois glass with much the same story of just like I wasn't even drinking Stella. I can't remember what I was drinking, but it wasn't Stella. I think I asked for it in a Stella glass. I think I was having like a vodka and orange, and I was like, can I have a double? And they were like, yeah, sure. And I was like, can I have it in a pint glass? And they were like, we only really have these glasses. And I was like, that is fine. And then I never gave it back. So I just took a Stella glass. I think it's a British rite of passage. Yeah.
I
Like,
have a full set of steak knives.
Wait, okay, right. Why is it every time we tell a story, Ali has to come in with this like next level? Like, I'd like to point out this is not the only time Ali has done this. We were sat like a group of us chatting about stuff, about like our childhoods and like hanging out with like the neighbor kids, da 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 da. And Ali was like, "Oh yeah, my neighbors made meth." What? Like, it was just. So when I'm like, oh yeah, we stole glasses, ha ha ha, rite of passage, Ali's like, I've got knives.
I was just about to say, like, oh, I don't know if that's just a British thing to steal the pint glasses from a pub, and then Ali comes in here with knives.
Yeah, well, Americans, they've got to go big or go home, right?
Stealing glasses is definitely a thing, but we were at like a reception for a wedding thing at like the Hard Rock Cafe or some shit, and my husband said these knives are really cool. Well, we were at a restaurant. And my husband was like, these knives are really cool. And I was like, we were at a table with like 15 people. And so I had like 4 people just give me their knives when they were done. And I just stuffed them in my coat and we took them. So now we have 4
Remind me that if I ever get married,
set.
to invite you and to bring extra knives.
Yeah, don't worry about bringing extra knives. Just make sure that the catering staff count them in and count them out again.
Oh, make sure
No, it's fine. She can take them. I'm just going to supply the extra knives.
Additional knives. I mean, considering carrying knives in the UK is an offence anyway, and that every year London has a knife amnesty.
I can give her a box. If they're just standard eating knives, I can give her a wee box for her cutlery. Therefore, she's transporting cutlery. That is fine.
I don't think Ali needs any more knives. I think these ones that she's stolen from the last reception, probably enough.
I'm also now wondering how
that is our only set of steak knives.
Mm-hmm. So long as you declare them.
Look,
if you declare them and put them in your
but American airport security scares me. They freaked out with us once because me and my dad had normal passports. And my mum still had the little code that you get when you're living on a military base abroad. Yeah. Me and my dad have run out since, but my mum got hers when we were still in Germany. And they didn't know what it was, fair enough, but like kicked off. We were like being detained. I was being asked weird questions about my parents. And then eventually, when they couldn't figure out what the hell it was, they were like, what is this code? And my mum was like, it was in the army. And suddenly saluting all around, thank you for your service, go on through. We were like, all right.
Yeah.
Okay. Could have just let us through. It was fine.
Yeah. It kills me. Right, should we? Yeah. Thanks, Ali. Let's talk about the book. The reason we're all here. Now, I made a threat in the Discord that I run which is that I am not going to do a non-spoiler discussion because, quite frankly, this book was fucking wild, and I just want to go in with my thoughts, you know?
Thank God.
So we're going straight in with spoiler discussion. Having said that, I do want to know what you guys rated this. Now, I have consistently given all the skullduggeries 3s and 4s. I think there was only one that got a 3 because there was a bit of like waffle. Or like I think the first one I gave 3, like I enjoyed it, but like I don't know, they've just got more wild. I was so close to giving this one a 5 because it was just like this is for children. What is going on? Like there's like police brutality in it, and there's like psychological warfare, and just like the whole thing is wild. So it was definitely a 4.5 for me because I just walked away being like, what, you know?
I just went back and checked my core pile spreadsheet. I've got it like saved on my bookmarks. Went and checked, and if anyone else uses core pile, it was 8.57, which is a 4-star for me.
Very cool.
And look, like I love it. It's got one of my favorite scenes in at the end. It's my favorite thing in the series, but just a high 4.
Excellent.
4 for me. Just as all of them are, to be honest. It gets later and then they start going into 5s, but this one's a 4-star, I think. Just.
That's cool. How about you, Ali?
I also gave it 4.5 because I thought it was better than some of the ones I rated 4, but I don't. I have such problems rating series because I'm like, but I have to say room because the other one's better.
Yeah, exactly. That is exactly my thing as well. And like usually if I'm doing a series, I will core pile them and then almost do them retroactively. So I don't necessarily, when you do the core pile bit, work out the point thing. I've just chunked them up in groups of 14 because if you're dividing 70 by like 5, it's going to work out at like 14. So I then go back and go, okay, yes, no, it makes sense to me that I enjoyed this one more, but it wasn't necessarily as well written, or like the plot wasn't as intriguing. Now it's really interesting. Slight tangent. Ali and I are currently buddy reading The Mime Order. I mean, I finished it yesterday, but one of the things we were both saying is that we both really loved the first one, but The Mime Order feels like such a middle book. And I think what I was worried about with Dark Days is that after such a massive climactic ending to the first trilogy, was the next trilogy going to start with enough energy to push it through? Which it absolutely fucking did. Like, it was just, they came in and were like, aha, that was child's play. Here we go. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. I think that for me, if we are doing it, if anything, my thoughts on the others are going down so that I can elevate this one. You know what I mean? But when you've only got 5 you can score it out of, it makes it very difficult. So, yeah.
On a quick tangent related to your tangent about the Mime Order, read the Bone Season, went through it, mad. Mime Order, I only managed to sit myself and go through it because I was reading it on, like, I enjoyed it, but it's a difficult read. I was on the train from Newcastle to Portsmouth. Now, I know that the UK is small, but that's an 8-hour journey. So that's why I finished that, and then I read it in my flat. It was when I was moving to Portsmouth. So I was by myself, moving down, and the only thing I had in my flat when I got in was the book. So that's how I finished that. But I can promise you that the songwriting, it's also shorter, but it also, it's written at a slightly faster pace. Anyway.
Because I just read The Pale Dreamer, so now I know all of that for when I get to the next of them.
That's cool. Yeah. But yeah, back to Dark Days. So, okay. I've got tabs because there were specific things that I wanted to discuss. And where usually what I try to do is organise my thoughts into characters so that we can then kind of process stuff as we go. This time I've done it on key milestones and things that I want to talk about. So the first tab that I've got is Ghastly getting his scars magically removed / disguised by China, which I think is the most adorable thing I've ever seen in my life. The idea that he's gone literally hundreds of years being like, this is how I look or whatever, and then he's just like, oh, I just want to be able to walk places, you know, those 3 years or 3 months, whatever, however long it was, that he was a statue, he's like, yeah, I had some time to think about it, and I'd like people to be able to see my face. I'm just like,
I
I don't
really
know.
It was cute, but I also like the only character that is really frequently considered ugly. They had to fix, so now
But at
he
least
can
it
be
doesn't
not
last that
ugly.
long. But in that sense,
Yeah,
like,
It's not a permanent thing, yeah.
And it is the way that he has used it in the book has purely been we're around mortals who are going to freak out if
Yeah.
they see the scars because they're magical. He's never used it like walking around the sanctuary or something. So it is bad in that it is like, oh yeah, the ugly one's been fixed, but at the same time, it's purely like,
So
Yeah, the reasoning behind it
dressed
is
as like really alternative dressing in like office appropriate
Yeah.
attire to go to work. It's that sort of thing in my mind where it's not like stopping them from being who they are. It's just like meaning that there aren't issues. They are like they already have a walking skeleton. It'd be handy not to have the scars.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But it does make me wonder, like, if China can do this for people, why isn't that used more often? Other than she just doesn't want to, or she's quite expensive, or whatever it is. I just feel like...
Do you mean for aesthetic reasons, just as in, like, I don't like my nose?
No, as in, like, so that people can, like, so Skullduggery Pleasant can carry about his business, because his business traverses both the magical and normal world. So that would be really fucking handy to just be able to walk around and not have mortals see him. And to make a comparison to the book that should not be named, there are things in place in that magical world that mean that mortals, or muggles as they're called in that instance, I'm trying really hard not to say it directly, they either don't notice or they quickly forget they've come across magic. So it just, for me, it's not a plot hole, but it's almost like a plot deviation where here's something that would be really, really useful just day in, day out, but that wouldn't make for good conflict. So we're just going to have it now, or I didn't think of it early enough. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, they did already have the sensitives as well, who, after any, like, battles or anything where the public's there, they go in and they just talk to people and essentially wipe their minds in a weird way. A bit like, to link back to, like, Obliviate. It's the
Like
same
Noah
sort.
Life and like in Men in Black.
Yeah.
Black, yes, good one.
Yeah,
But-
well done.
Wasn't there
I
some...
watched
Wait,
it recently. It's in my head.
what chapter is it?
Where they talk about the magic that
Give me a second, I'm going to quickly turn the light on because I'm a bit dark in here.
No, you're fine. Let me find it. I think it's chapter
Let
3.
there be light.
It's chapter 3, and they discuss it on page 28.
The pages are not helpful. I have the hardback, but thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't even help that. I never even owned the hardbacks.
I just take what Hannah gives me.
Yeah, I'm just taking the words at it. So I'm just like, can't remember this whatsoever. Like, I can remember what happened, can't remember the exact chapter.
Page 34 for me, which is 3 pages back from the next chapter. So I'm assuming page 28-ish.
Well,
For you guys. It says that he asked China if she could help to blend into a crowd. That was all he asked specifically. So in terms of like making him not ugly, it's not what he asked. And then she came up with the facade. No, I'm in the north. Facade. I'm aware it's wrong, but I don't like it.
Facade sounds more southern than facade does.
I don't like the R noise.
Facade.
Facade. It's a facade.
Call it a facade then. Just go all in and call it a facade.
If I'm going all in, it's a Ficardi.
Ficardi, yes, it's a Ficardi. I like that. And
So
that sounds very like the kind of drink you would order from a club in Newcastle. To be fair,
Mixed with a Bacardi Breezer.
Yeah, that's what I was going with.
And it would cost like £1. It would be great. So she came up with the Ficardi tattoo. So moving on from that. So she's... Look, I had an intent with this, okay?
it's fine. I'm just ridiculous.
Basically, he went to her and said, like, help me blend in. And
Yeah.
she invented something new. So it is, like, mentioned in canon that this is something brand new that she's made up. Like, it's not, like, an established thing that is available in the world of sorcery. It is,
China
like,
just
China
over the top.
is good at symbols and went, let me have a look.
Kind of a tangent from that. Speaking of new things, Skullduggery just rocking up like, I could do this, and this now. This stuff was never possible before, but I can do it now.
Yeah.
If anyone was going to discover the new stuff, it was going to be him. If he was given 5
I
minutes.
know, but it's just the way it's introduced. Like, she just goes there and he's like, oh yeah, this is a thing I do.
The thing is, though, like, that is so Derek Landy, because I feel like other writers would be like, oh, whilst for you it may have only been 8 months, for me it has felt like a millennia. And whilst the first few centuries I fell into my own woe, I then discovered that I could do these things, and I have spent all this time working on it. Da-da-da-da. But Derek Landy's like, we could do that. Or I could just be honest about it and be like, oh yeah, I can do these things now. Like, because that's it. That's all you need to know. Fundamentally, Skullduggery has lost all sense of himself, time, friendship, whatever. Like, he's not where mentally he is supposed to be. But physically, he's picked up these other things to survive. He has been put in so many hot pressure situations, he has had to adapt. And it's, like, not necessarily something that you are told, but something that is shown in his later behaviour, which I really appreciate. Because then he's not over-egging the pudding, but it is so Landy to just be like, yeah, I can do this now.
No, over-egging the pudding.
Yeah.
I've never heard that in my life.
You're not. Please tell me someone else has heard the phrase over-egg pudding.
I mean, I just assume that everything you say is just some, like, crazy British bullshit, so...
You're like, oh, she's on a British
This
bullshit.
one I've never heard.
No. Wait till you hear Irish.
It is definitely a thing.
Brilliant.
Let me, please, Becky, you tell me you've heard that as well.
No.
Right.
Never.
Okay, Google. Where does the phrase over-egg the pudding come from?
According to the less than be greater than phrase, less than be greater than finder. Over-egg the pudding is an English phrase and first appeared in the mid-19th century. It originated as a simple literal phrase alluding to the way that baked foods may be spoiled by using too many eggs.
Who the hell puts too many eggs in baked food?
So when you bake stuff, egg is used to basically hold it all together. So if you use too much flour,
yes,
it
I
will
know.
rise too high. If you put too much egg in it, it just stays really stodgy. And it goes like, it becomes a solid, basically. So if you over-egg the pudding, it's
I apparently
great.
have never fucked up baking to that level before.
I don't bake, unless it's in one of those like pre-mixed boxes. Don't fucking bother. They say put 2 eggs in, I put 2 eggs in, job done. But yes, so over-egg the pudding is a thing, guys.
I love it. I'm keeping it now. This happens a lot around England and Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. There's just random phrases that no one's ever heard from outside your region, but they make intrinsic sense. Like
Yeah, there's 144 different dialects in the English language.
It moves like every something like 20 miles or so, doesn't it? It's something like that.
Probably less than that. I can differentiate a Mackem from a Geordie, and they're only down the road.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think even Kent, there's like a difference between like an East Kent and a West Kent.
Yeah, because we sound different, even though we're both from Kent.
I mean, to be fair, I sound like this because I watched a lot of American television as a child, and then one day my dad turned to me and said, "You're not American," and that's embarrassing. And it broke me so wholeheartedly that I then was like, right, I need to sound English. And now I sound like this. So no one else in Folkestone sounds like this. Sometimes, like, my mum does this thing. My mum grew up in Blackheath. So when she is angry, she gets kind of Cockney. And, like, there's moments when, like, I'll be talking and I will slip from this into not quite Cockney, but definitely South London. And that's how I was raised.
And then I just sound like I'm from Chatham all the times.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was brought up in Chatham. Can you tell?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Yes, I can.
Fine.
Ali won't be able to, but
And-
I can.
I'm just a hardcore American who randomly slips into almost sounding British because my only fucking friends are British.
Yeah.
And I am just don't ask.
You sound Welsh.
Apparently, I'm Welsh.
Yeah.
Well, your name last time
You
was
should
not
spend more
Welsh.
time there.
Okay. I want to move on to the next little tab that I've got. So the next one
you find
is.
it,
Go on.
just with the power. It's related. Powers. Skullduggery.
Mhm.
It's actually related to the book. It's fine. With the kind of like, oh, he's just suddenly got these powers. It could have been fucked up if then, you know how sometimes like someone will through trial and tribulation discover this like fantastic new power, and then everyone of the same power type can instantly use it, and it's easy to learn once you know. Instead, Val is just like, teach me how to fucking fly, and Skullduggery was like, learn the magic. I like that.
Thing is, like, he's had elements of it before because when he came out of the water, he was kind of like floating on it.
Yeah.
Like he was using like pressure plates of air as he was controlling like the water to stand on it. So it's not like he didn't have a basis of it. Even Valkyrie has a basis of it because when she falls, she uses that pressure to slow her descent and land gracefully. There are elements of it early on, but it's just that idea that yes, you are on your own for a long period of time. You are going to develop this skill to survive. Do you know what I mean? Like you're gonna
You
push
get thrown
it.
off the cliff enough times, and you're gonna get bored and learn how to fly.
Exactly. So anyway, the next thing that I wanted to talk about is my favourite thing from this book, and that is the Revenge Club, which I just love as a concept. Like how many times, like thing is, okay, so I grew up watching Veronica Mars and Buffy and like Scooby-Doo and things like that, and there's so many instances where there'll be like a couple of bad guys will like join forces and just to be that like extra bit evil. And I think that was such a clever thing for Landy to use in this instance because like I said, I was so worried that after that really climactic ending of the Faceless Ones just destroying it, like even if they're not as powerful, and they're really not, just the concept of them all like ganging up on one child just killed me.
It's the fact that you're like, oh yeah, ganging up, more powerful, join forces, and I'm just thinking of scapegrace.
Right? And this is the thing. So it's like you get away with it because there's like this really funny element to it. That even if they are shit, it doesn't matter. Like there's still tension there. Like when they all meet up, like okay, yes, Scapegrace as a zombie. Can we just
Look, have you seen what I'm wearing today? This is my. I wore this specifically.
He would be very offended.
Yeah,
It's taken me until the very end of this book to differentiate the members of the Revenge Club from each other still because I'm so bad. I'm like, they all want to murder people, and one of them, I can't,
not
I just like,
people. Not people. One person. They all want to kill one person, except for
Also,
Scrooge
can you just
Jackson
tell me
also
you
wants
could
Spanish.
differentiate Scapegrace from the rest of them?
I mean, the thing is that
idiots.
I just can't. They get in like the first. I'm bad with names, so like they gave me so many names so quickly that I'm like, okay, I know that like this is the burrowy dude. I know that this is the stabby dude, but I can't. You give me the name, and I'm like, is that the burrowy dude or the stabby dude?
I mean, fair.
maybe
You should make a list. Just burrowy
maybe we
dude.
should annotate these
Anyway.
books and then over the top of every single name, Stabby, Burrowy.
Make a list of them.
It'll probably help.
Also, how
yeah, no.
spectacularly their plan simultaneously failed and didn't fail in the Midnight Hotel. So I forgot that the Midnight Hotel was in this book. So, as we discussed before, there we go, have read it before. So I don't remember when things come in. I forgot that it was this book that it came in until it mentioned the... What are they called? Help me. What are they called? The black things with it. Remnants.
Remnants.
I was like, what is that?
Remnants.
Clearly.
I have a specific image in my head, okay?
Okay.
It's like wisps apart from they're like upside down. So the tail bit's just going out the back. It's like a tadpole. It's like a giant ethereal tadpole.
Right,
I
okay.
see
Yeah.
a misty squiggle. I don't know if that makes
Ethereal
sense.
tadpole. Ethereal tadpole.
Yeah.
Can we rename this live stream Ethereal Tadpole now?
Sure. Yeah. In fact, let's change the entire fucking read-along name to Ethereal Tadpole.
Let's at the very least change the group chat to Ethereal Tadpole.
Yeah, I'm on it.
Emma's not going to
Let's
have
just
a
confuse
clue.
Emma, who's in the group chat but is not in the live.
How is Emma, by the way? Like, we haven't heard
Emma's
from her.
cool. Emma's got stuff going on, but I think they're just like, I've read the book, but like I don't know if they finished it or what, but yeah.
They've said that they've got no idea what happened, but they do remember the end, and not a spoiler because we're spoiler discussion, but going to leave till end of discussion, I assume. Plot point.
Yeah.
It's
So
over.
didn't finish it then.
Once
So it looks like
to that part, that and Hannah knows because I messaged Hannah. I was like, "So a thing happened, and I know that another thing's going to happen." Like immediately, I was like, "This is what this is," and I got to the end, and I was like, "Yup."
Hannah was
It's
messaging
exactly
me
what I
going-
wanted it to be, though.
Hannah was
Huh?
messaging me going, "Is it this person?" No.
I'm not gonna lie. So like this is the thing. So I was saying this to Ali, and like I said, it's got the spoiler thing on it, so you can say it outright. The fact that the very last line essentially is that Valkyrie is Darkess, right? Now I can't remember if Darkess is hinted at in the prior book or whether it's just in this one, but there is a thing that annoyed me about that, because there's a bit in it where they talk about the vision of Darkess. And it, to me,
hide your face.
just makes it kind of not possible that it's Valkyrie.
Yeah,
so
but visions are.
I
think
appreciate that.
I've just seen other things that do this kind of thing, though, and I think that's why I was like, yeah, but the vision could like mean different things.
Yeah. I get that. I get that. And that there's always going to be things that change and stuff like that. I get that, right?
Well, and there's just ambiguity to it.
I love the fact that. Do you want me to take you off screen so that you can just not spoiler it?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, good. Okay, so there's this bit, right? Dark figures were visible now around the edge of the room, and they were struggling, running and leaping. Some of them carried weapons, and Valkyrie recognized the silhouettes of cleavers. There was a shadow in the steam in front of them, throwing cleavers back like they were little more than an annoyance. Valkyrie backed up until she was beside Skullduggery. What are we seeing? The future, he said slowly. I love they've both gone. The image cleared, and a new figure drifted into being. Valkyrie saw herself a few years older than she was now. The Valkyrie in the steam was taller, and her bare arms were lean and muscled like Tannis. A tattoo swelled from her left shoulder to her elbow, and she wore a black metal gauntlet on her right hand, which is important for reasons. Right hand. Her legs were strong, the black trousers clinging to them. Her boots were scuffed, splattered with blood. I've seen this, the Valkyrie in the steam said, her dark hair whipping across her face. I was watching from. She turned her head and looked straight at where Valkyrie was standing. There. Valkyrie couldn't move. This is where it happens, her older self continued, sadness in her voice. Stephanie. Two people in the distance sprinting this way. The older Valkyrie shook her head slowly. Please don't make me watch it again. As if her prayer was answered, the older Valkyrie disappeared. The two people came closer, and Valkyrie's heart plummeted. Desmond and Melissa Edgley ran through the steam. Skullduggery held her back against the wall. This hasn't happened yet, he reminded her quietly. Her parents stopped running and looking around, and the dark figure Valkyrie had glimpsed earlier stepped out behind them. No, Valkyrie screamed, and Skullduggery held her tighter as they watched her parents turn. Darkess, Finbar whispered. The shadow called Darkess raised her arm, and a black flame engulfed the steam images of Valkyrie's parents, turning them to ash before they could even scream their agony. So, if this is a prediction for the future, and Valkyrie both acknowledges that this is where her parents die, walks away, and then another figure who's already passed then kills her parents, I'm either really intrigued to see how that plays out in real life, or is it a self-fulfilling prophecy that she's going to become Darkess now that she's seen this? Do you know what I mean?
I mean, it could be a lot of things, or your idea that it like has something to do with the mirror image could be too.
See, this is the thing. So, like, I could understand it if it's Valkyrie acknowledging that Darkess is her mirror image, right? Because if it is part of her, then I could understand why it would have her name. Now, I appreciate that's probably not the case because Abby and Becca haven't come back. But I just
I also
find
don't want that to be, because honestly, that's just like not as exciting in my opinion. Like, I'm sorry,
I know,
just
I
don't
just
want
find
it to
this
resolve
particular
to be the
passage-
mirror image.
To me, this just feels like it just made the plot twist at the end where they're like, and she was Darkess all along, just kind of a bit, oh. Because, like, you've set it up here that it's going to be someone that they're going to chase down, and it would almost be interesting to me to have it as, like, a rival character, or someone that they haven't met yet, but they're going to come across in this trilogy that is going to become her equal, that she then has to fight, and then in that moment
Abby had to mute.
I'm not muting, but Jesus, I can just. The thing is that I can just about remember. Like, I can just about remember what's happened in the later books, and Abby, you and me are gonna have a discussion, like, because I've forgotten everything.
I hate that. I hate that you go and do that to help me.
Literally, I was
like,
here.
every time, like, okay, so last one was really bad because I like made a comment and then Abby went, "Oh, I need to check something," and like texting to Becca, and then I just see Becca like back, and I was just like, "Oh, all right, fine, I guess. Fuck me. It's not like it's my read along or anything."
Do you want
my
to
thing
be
is
spoiled?
that I just
Do you want the spoilers? Because we will give
Kind
them
of.
to you.
Like a little,
We
like
will
a
happily
little
ruin
bit.
everything.
Yeah.
see, you
We
can just
will
tell
run
me
it.
the whole thing and I'll be fine.
There's the things I actually like. I really do like spoilers. The thing is, like, there was this thing. I can't remember if it was like San Diego University or UCLA, but there was one that proved that people enjoy books more when they know how it ends because there's no anxiety of it. It's why we watch the same TV shows and read the same books over and over again. Is it alleviates the anxiety. So I don't mind a spoiler because I'm just like it soothes me. But like, I kind of don't because I do want to read it organically, so then we can talk about it. But I also really want to know. So don't spoil it yet.
Honestly
I
am
guess.
so bad. Like, if there are things later in a series, I will straight up Google myself spoilers. I haven't done it for this, but I will do it because I'm just like, I just want to know, and then I'll enjoy getting there. But
Yeah,
I think personally with this series, the build-up makes the plot twist better. Like
if
when
you
it's
want,
never
if
so far.
you
Nothing has
actively
been
want
like.
spoilers,
He's just too
if you
good at
actively
giving the
want to go
hints.
for spoilers, just do it book by book, because like sometimes
Yeah.
you do. Sometimes you just want spoilers, but I really recommend just doing it book by book. So like, if you now want to spoil yourself for Mortal Coil, sure, but we're up to book what, 15? Don't spoil yourself all the way to the end because
Well, it just wouldn't make
changes
sense.
how you experience the entire thing.
Yeah.
And
It's really silly. I bought myself the grimoire, and I'm like, I know damn well there was no point in buying this yet because I can't read it yet.
have you seen my May wrap up?
it's
No,
hilarious.
it's in my watch later.
She's so angry that none of us haven't read the grimoire. Well, I'm in the same place as you, Hannah.
fucking good.
Because I haven't even read the grimoire yet because I haven't gotten past book 9. So once we get to book 9, Abby's screwed because not even I've
None
read
of you, none of you can read it. None of you, because it spoils
I
all the way up.
I looked at all the art and that was it.
The art's good. Look, there's an overarching, like it says on the back, there's an overarching storyline. Okay, it's not a spoiler. And that is fucking beautiful. But you can't read it without getting the spoilers for everything else. Even if I was like to tell you exactly which pages of the hardback copy to read, there's stuff within it that would spoil stuff in the general series. But I gave it 5 stars. Every single thing I've given, like the first book, 5 stars. All of the other books so far, I've given 4 stars. But the Grimoire is fantastic. It's so good.
We'll get there. We'll get there eventually. In like next year at some point.
Eventually.
I say my video in about 2 years' time.
Right, okay. Well, seeing as we're not allowed to discuss that anymore, let's move on to another thing. So, the next thing that I have tabbed after the Revengers Club, which I thought was adorable, is the Desolation Engine, which I found really, really interesting because, one, just the description of it being like a bomb, but it doesn't make a sound, it just disintegrates everything within its radius. And the fact that it is made by our favourite medical genius.
Our little bean. Who was less beady.
Yeah, the fact that Grouse has created this absolute monster of a machine.
But his response to it, which is like, I didn't think people would use it. I just wanted to try.
Thing is, that's such a science approach. It's just like, well, I thought I'd ask the question, not whether I should ask the question, you know? I took this thing that was in theory and I made it real. Soz. Like, that's like the hydrogen bomb and like the atom bomb. And
this felt very much like the Mythbusters. It was like the only difference between science and throwing it around is writing it down. And instead he went one step too further and went, I'm actually going to do this.
But then it's the fact that he knew from... Hi! It's the fact that he knew from leftover bits that there had been 2 made.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
because he doesn't remember that. He's brought either, I can't remember whether they just don't remember or whether trauma response. Possibly both. But like, he doesn't remember, at least at the moment. I don't know. I genuinely can't remember this part. Whether, like, what happened when the remnant was inside of him. He has no clue what happened. But then he looks at that afterwards and goes, there's too many bits there.
Yeah.
I made 2.
Because he's a genius. And how bad would it be if he were an evil genius? Like, it's going to be really interesting moving forwards, the relationship now between Grouse and Tanith, because I think Valkyrie's response to it was really immature, and not in like a negative immature way, in like an honest immature way, in that it's like, oh, I'm sure you'll get over it kind of thing. And it's like, how do you get over someone torturing you? Like, how do you get over that? Like, the fact that it not only would have been painful, there would have been a psychological element to it. The fact that it's from someone that you're meant to trust. Not only that, but that person, not even the thing that was inside it, that person has broken your trust by creating a machine powerful enough to destroy an entire stadium. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's on the back of, oh, and you tortured me, and you did this. Do you know what I mean? Like, staking her to a chair. So, like, the whole thing is just absolutely brutal. And that was one of those moments where I was like, this is for kids!
I love the fact that Derek Landy does not hold back in these. He's just like, you're a kid, but you're this far in, you can handle it, and just carries on. Yeah, I love it.
When I was looking for trigger warnings for the series, because I'm now putting them, like, in the description of every video I do. One, cannot find a good resource for trigger warnings for Skullduggery Peasant, so all I'm doing is guessing from what I know.
Yeah.
And then putting death in every trigger warning, because it's about a dead man walking, so that's at least a bit.
People do die in it. Like, that's the thing, is like this one, I would definitely put trigger warnings for psychological warfare, and not gaslighting necessarily, but police brutality and physical abuse. Yeah, yeah, all of those.
But, so, in my hunt to find it, there was an interview with him from a few years ago now, quite a few years ago, before trigger warnings was such a well-known thing. And it was when they were just starting to come into play. And they were basically asking him at that time what his thoughts were on trigger warnings. I don't think this would be his opinion at the moment, because basically he was just like, I'll explain further. But he has, as far as you can see, like, if you interact with him on social media, it looks as though he's trying to become more aware of things like this. So that's always appreciated. But at the time, back when the interview was done, his response was essentially, I think, like, that my readers, if they're uncomfortable, will stop reading.
This is the thing, is it's really interesting to me, the conversation around trigger warnings anyway, because trigger warnings have had other names, because like you have them in games and you have them in film and you have them in some theatre as well. It's just interesting that the idea that because it's in a book, it needs clarifying in a different way, because like if you watch a TV series and it's like on normal like mainstream TV or even on Netflix will have that little bar at the top being like scenes of nudity, foul language, violence, whatever. It will have those things as a heads up to you. So why is it any different in a book?
So specific. Like they'll say like scenes of violence, but they won't say like character is sexually assaulted. They'll mention at the end of, especially I'm thinking BBC here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it happens when you then watch it on like iPlayer or whatever, but when it's like shown live on air, at the end of it, it's like, and if you were struggling with any of the deep themes of tonight's topics, here are list numbers on screen. I'm going to read them out for the blind people watching. This is where you can contact if this has disturbed you. But they don't mention, like they say it's going to be violent, but they don't say this is the triggers to look out for. So I think it's because the book community is when these are good. This is a good thing to have. We're going to implement them like to the bone. And I think
it is partly that, but I also think it's a different process of the media. But that's what I'm saying, is it's really interesting to me that there's still this like, oh, books don't need trigger warnings. It's like, well, everything else has a rating system, whereas with books, it's either a middle grade, a YA, or an adult book. And your understanding is that middle grade will have this set amount of topic. YA might have more, in which case we'll put 12 plus if it gets a bit raunchy. And then if it's an adult, could be anything, could be absolutely anything, because it's for adults. And I appreciate that in a game, if something's an 18, the same rules apply. It could be absolutely anything. It's going to be violent, it's going to have this, it's going to have swearing, etc. Where I think the interest comes is the fact that, considering books is one of the oldest mediums to take in a new story, trigger warnings look at the individual audience response as opposed to a general assumption. Now, I appreciate that's probably because the people that are consuming it are consuming it on an individual level. Unless you're literally sat here together reading at the same time, you're not going to have a group experience the same way you would watching a film, playing a game, etc. So there are going to be certain things that might make you uncomfortable. You're going to react to them in a slightly different way. I'm boring Becca, so I will stop. But it's just interesting to me.
I get on camera and start yawning. I swear.
I am joking. But I do think it's really, really interesting, because I think, for me, trigger warnings are really important. It's why on as many of the Waypoint books that I have on my site, I have trigger warnings, specifically on adult books, where I know the trigger warnings are more prolific than in YA and middle grades. I don't think I've had to write a single trigger warning for middle grades yet. That it just has not
very pleasant yet.
Right? Unless it's something for like homophobia or transphobia or something like that, where it's a case of they're overcoming something that might be triggering to someone. But I do think they're really, really important. And I think I don't think this is the other thing. The other thing is, trigger warnings are usually linked to censorship, and the idea that it's a case of, okay, well, I can't enjoy this particular thing, but because it has those things in it. Do you know what I mean? So, like, a game that's an 18 will be censored for 15-year-olds. It's not going to have the same sort of thing. Like, a TV series has to be a 15 if it has more than one fuck in it per hourage of episode or whatever, which is why Breaking Bad is technically a 15, because they only had the F-bomb once per season, and they had to use it in particular places so that they didn't go up to an 18, because then they couldn't have their show at a certain time and have it broadcast, and they wouldn't have had the followership that they had. So it's, again, interesting that for me, trigger warnings aren't the same as censorship, but they are treated like censorship. And that's why I think a few years ago, if someone was like, oh, are you going to put trigger warnings on your book? People would be like, no, because I don't want to censor myself. I don't want to feel like I have to not include these things, otherwise I might upset someone. But it's kind of the opposing argument, really. And actually having trigger warnings means you can write whatever the fuck you want. Just let people know that's going to be in there. Like, my book has fat phobia in it. So I'm going to put, that's not going to be a trigger for many people, but for the people that it is a trigger for, I don't want people going into it and then being blindsided by comments that might upset them or might like spark something else. Do you know what I mean? Like there's, I make allusions to things that are important to the story, but that doesn't mean that the audience experience should then be scuppered by it. I will get off my
myself. I don't need like trigger warnings myself. There's only one thing that I could need a trigger for, which would be depression. Like if it goes really deep into that, for example, what was it? The Reasons to Stay Alive by Matt Haig. Fucked with my head. And so if that had a trigger warning on it, and if I paid attention to it, which is a separate matter, then I might not have picked that one up. But I can deal with it. Maybe I shouldn't have to, but I can. Meaning I don't need trigger warnings. But why, like, they're still so important. Like, I try and avoid them myself unless I'm putting a book in a video because I don't want the spoiler. To me, it's a spoiler. I recently, like, making my TBR video for this month, I was putting the trigger warning down below. And so some of them was, like, fine. Like, I've got 2 thrillers on my TBR. So, like, you tend to know what's going to be in them anyway. But then I put the trigger warnings for Pet by Akweoke Emezi. And that's spoiled part of the book for me. But that's kind of like my role as a 500 fucking followers content creator. But I'm putting something out there, so it's my responsibility to provide access. So that's like kind of like the downside of like, well, tough. I now have to spoil myself if I'm going to mention these books because I don't want to cause someone that harm by not having access to the information. So it's obviously it's a personal choice. I could choose not to put them, but I think that for me personally, it would be a dick move for me not to include them.
I think the thing is, it's like it has spoiler elements to it, but for me, I really don't see them as spoilers at all. Because like I am triggered by sexual assault on minors. So if there's anything about like a teacher being predatory towards a student or like grooming behavior, anything that's okay, if it was in Lolita, it triggers me, right? And that's partly because of when I was a rugby player and I was about 14, 15 years old, my rugby coach sexually assaulted 4 of my teammates. And it was something that like at the time didn't process as an adult, like I have to. And then going into teaching and having to deal with the safeguarding of a young student who'd been sexually assaulted by her cousin, it's something that like now, like it was really jarring because when I studied Lolita for my master's was after these instances. That was where, and like I knew damn well what I was going into. I knew this book was going to be about the sexual assault of minors, and even that as a warning wasn't enough for me to not have an emotional reaction to it. And like it wasn't even like I was sick, I was angry. Like I had to listen to it as an audiobook because I couldn't just sit there and read it. And I just blitzed my flat and just kind of like cleared everything away. I threw loads of stuff away. Like I just completely I had to do something. And I told my lecturer, like, I don't think I'm gonna be able to talk about this book. I don't think I'm gonna be able to communicate the things that we should discuss about a piece of work without showing just how fucking triggered by it I am. And she's like, that's fine, like you don't have to say anything, like don't feel pressured, And I was silent for like a good chunk of that lecture. And then the one guy that was on my course was like, oh, I quite liked it. I thought the writing was kind of beautiful. And I went, and like this just angry word vomit, just kind of like all those things that I've been processing on my own in my flat just came tumbling out. Like I didn't have a go at the guy, but there was a lot of this gesture. Do you know what I mean? Like I got angry, and now I can't pick up a book that has any of that stuff in it because the moment it gets to that, I just can't deal with it. Like I just don't want to deal with it. So like for me, it's really bizarre. It's not necessarily because it's like a secondhand thing. Nothing happened to me. And yet I'm taking on this thing and I'm very much triggered by this thing that has happened to other people because I've had to help them process it and then never really got over that. So like I won't read My Dark Vanessa. It's never fucking happening. I'm not going to read it because to me it's just Lolita but from her perspective. I tried to read Asking for It by Louise O'Neill. Got like 12 chapters into that and was like, no, like I don't know why I'm trying to force myself to read this. So for me, it's very, very easy for me to empathize with people who need trigger warnings, because for me, I only need those. And like, even there's certain instances where I can read about domestic abuse, and so long as I know going into it, it's going to have elements of domestic abuse, or it works its way up to it, I can deal with that. That's fine. Like, I just have that emotional preparation. But for me, having it isn't a spoiler. It's not like, so for example, I read The Murder of Graham Catton, and there's some stuff in that which works its way up, and you're given the trigger warnings kind of at the beginning of you're going to come across this and this. It's not a spoiler, because it's not like, okay, but on this chapter, on this page, he does this kind of thing. It's just that kind of like, and because it's a thriller, you don't know what the truth is. It's really, really interesting. So for me,
like that, like the title "Murder of So and So," it just made me think. Then would you need to put a trigger warning in for death? Because it's in the title.
So
you know what I mean? Like,
this
it
is
says,
the thing.
this man's murdered. Do you state a trigger warning of murder?
See, this is the thing. So, like, for me, I put the trigger warnings of death, violence, domestic abuse, gaslighting, psychological abuse, and a couple of other things. Because for me, whilst they're not in every single chapter, and they are worked into the narrative in a way that is very, very cleverly done, they are still things that I know damn well I would not recommend them to people who are triggered by domestic abuse. There's a friend of mine who is an author who has written about domestic abuse. She wrote The Rabbit Girls and The Puzzle Women. And both of those books, whilst being historical and set in 1980s Germany, they both look at domestic abuse. Does she read about domestic abuse? No, because it's triggering for her. For her, the writing process is different to her reading process. I would not recommend she read The Murder of Graham Catton, because I think for her, it would be far too triggering. Would I recommend it to everyone else? Yes, because it's really fucking good. Like, it's so good. So I think it's just having that balance. And like, it was really interesting. The 5th season has a child death in it, and it's in like the 1st chapter, and it's kind of what starts the whole narrative on. So it's described in the blurb. Like, it's not a spoiler if it's in the blurb. Like, it's right there.
But then if that death happens at the end of the book, and there's like, that is then technically, for someone who isn't triggered by it, technically would be a spoiler. Like, so for me, again, massive privilege here, I don't really need them. So then if I read trigger warnings, or if I was shown trigger warnings that a kid's going to die at the end of this book, and there's no link to that anywhere else, I'm like, well, like, especially with the 5th season, obviously you've said it happens at the start, but there's not many there's not many children. There's children, but there's not children. So then I'd be like, well, that one's going to die.
But do you not feel that, okay, yeah, but you don't know when, so I think there will still be intrigue in it. Admittedly, there's not as much intrigue, but I think emotionally that's healthier, or psychologically that's healthier than kind of going, oh shit, the kid died. And like, whilst that might be interesting for a read, if it's something you have to deal with. So like, the reason I brought it up is because I was at the market, Folkestone Market, where I sell my books every Sunday. And someone came up and was like, oh, you recommended me the Bones season. I loved it, but I'm looking for something that's a bit more sci-fi-y. And I've heard really good things about the 5th season. And I was like, how old is your child? And she was like, oh, 3 months. And I was like, okay, as a heads up, the baby dies in the 1st chapter. And she was like, oh, no. And like, immediately like moved on to something else, because for her, that was just too much. Like, she doesn't want to deal with that, and that's fine. I appreciate that not every parent can be like Ali and just not give a shit, you know? Like, that's fine.
Before you get insulted, Ali, I can promise you my dad's the exact same.
Ali knows I'm kidding.
Hannah, I'm suddenly very glad that I read The Hunting Wife before you picked it up. Because you should not read that book.
This is the thing.
Get so mad.
We were going to buddy read it. We were going to buddy read it initially, because I was going to try and order a Book of the Month box, because I didn't realise at the time that it's US only, because I really like the cover, and I really like the idea of a whole bunch of rich women getting together to kill men. Oh, that is so my jam. Love that. So like, yeah, exactly. And then Ali was like, oh yeah, they literally just prey on these like young teenage boys and basically like groom them. And I was like, oh no, like could not cope with that. Like,
That's not
Oddly
empowerment.
enough, because it was just so frustrating.
yeah, imagine pitching it as you and your gal pals are going to commit some murder, and then actually it's not that at all. It's you and your gal pals are fighting over a teenage boy that you're both grooming separately.
Imagine if that was the other way around, though. It wouldn't get published, which is a good thing. But then why did this get late?
Publishing is a strange.
It's the fact that it's children.
Well, I think I'm pretty sure there's like well, no, and the thing that drives me nuts about it is it's like these teenage boys are made to feel like they want hot older women, like they're convincing the women to get with them, and I was like, that's not how this works.
No, that's grooming.
Right, let's go back to the dog days because that's somewhat less gross. But the reason we started in the first place
That conversation
is the fact that there are so many elements in this that I feel like, oh yeah, this is for kids. And the idea of like the torture and the police brutality of Ma like slapping Valkyrie. That took a lot. Go on, Abby.
I just wanted to mention at the beginning of this, when I stood up about 3 hours ago, I was checking on the back because they have age ratings. So I was like, So I can tell you, because I checked all of them, Dark Days, well, at least they do on the original copies. These were the ones that came out as they were published. So it's on the back, for me, it's on the back just next to the barcode there. So Dark Days is 9+, and so is Mortal Coil. And then the next one is Deathbringer, and that's also 9+. But after that, the ones in the original 9-book series all say 11+. Give me 1 second, I will check the new ones. Why did I have?
I would not have said 9+ for these ones. Like the stuff.
I mean, I would have them at the age of bedtime, but I would not recommend them to every 9-year-old.
The new ones are 11+ as well. All of the like
so that's secondary. 9+ is still early or like late primary school, whereas 11+ will be secondary, which makes sense.
We've got 11+ on the back. Like I have the anthology here. They've got 11+ right there. Wabam, bam bam.
Wabam.
Why is it in middle grade? YA starts at like 12. Like I'm aware 11+, but like it's the fact that it's still able. It's like
it's on the cusp. I think the thing is it's a writing style thing for me. So you may remember a certain booktuber who is no longer on BookTube because she done racist goofed multiple times, and then loads of other stuff came out about them. Anyway, the reason I bring her up is because before all that happened, we had a 3-hour-long conversation of sending like voice notes to each other that she was then going to turn into a conversation about what is the difference between a middle grade, a YA, and an adult. And for me, it's not necessarily about writing style, because you can have YAs that feel like they're for children, but necessarily like the content is more mature. So like, for example, Love is for Losers is written in an Adrian Mole diary style. It's very, very basic. It's very easy to engage with. Very, very short chapters. You could read it at a younger age, but it looks at teenage relationships, sexuality, understanding who you are as a person, ableism, grief, and other things that a middle grade could look at, but would look at in a different way. And I think for me, middle grade, the characters tend to think they know who they are, and they're either going on an adventure or they're learning what a lie is, and they're kind of like discovering it through that, but they themselves rarely change. There is very little different between Valkyrie of book 1 and Valkyrie of book 4. She is still sarcastic. She still believes that everything Skullduggery does is the right choice. She still very much believes in like good and evil. However, I suspect that when it hits that YA thing, YA often it is about learning something about yourself, and it's rarely necessarily a life journey, but it is that coming of age thing of like something you've always believed is true is proven to be wrong, and you now have to deal with the fact that everything you thought was true is a lie, and kind of then change as a person. Whereas an adult thing, you think you're done changing, and it's the world around you that is like manipulating you to change. So if you're going to adapt, it's something that you've already got a skill set for, and you're just kind of like learning how to go. So like, for example, romances, rarely do characters change in romances. It's usually a case of there's been a miscommunication or a misunderstanding or some shenanigans have happened, but they have the skill set already from get to A to B. They're just learning how to get there. Whereas if it was a YA, they're learning to change certain facets of who they are or realize who they are and what they don't need to be to get from A to B. So for me,
What about new adult?
that's what I'm saying. So for young adult, I think that's the difference. Is it's a case of
new adult.
See, this is the thing. Like new adult is like slap bang in the middle. It's really interesting because I think new adult is that cusp between the two, where they believe they're fixed, but they're not. But they're not mature enough to believe in themselves a little bit. So I think that's why publishing is going to have such a hard time promoting new adult, because it isn't just a case of here it is written for you in these ages, because there are adult books that are in that new adult category, but how do you market that and explain that to people as a concept? Because YA, it's really, really easy for publishers to be like, oh, it just means that the characters are going to be between these ages, because we're promoting to readers that are 2 years younger, because they're already going through this. So if a character is 16, the target audience is 14, and that tends to be how it works. Whereas with new adult, it could be anybody. And it's just like, yeah.
I think new adult, most of what I've seen listed as new adult, tends to feel like it tends to feel more written like young adult. It almost seems like it's young adult with things that you're just not going to give to a young adult. Like a young adult with sex, or it's young adult with more violence, or
most of the time it is just young adult with sex, and it's like, no, give us some variety.
Yeah. I think that's the thing, where it's young adult but set at university. Like, it's just they just wanted a different setting, and I think that's
young adult, but at uni they have a lot of sex, and it's like,
it's young adult but they got pregnant, you know. Like, it's like, oh, it tends to be that kind of stuff. And I think, yeah, it's really interesting to me because I don't think I actively pick up books that describe themselves as new adult, but I do actively pick up books that say YA because I like character development. For me, plot and character are the two important things in a book. Writing style, fine. I can take or leave a writing style, but if I find an author that understands how their characters work, I love that. And stories can fall apart for me with bad character development. Now, Skullduggery Pleasant is kind of an outlier in that there are enough interesting characters that they don't need to develop because the story is developing around these characters. Do you know what I mean? So, like, it's a nice balance of the two. Whereas, to make a comparison to a recent read that I was like, I don't care about these characters, in Cinderella is Dead, the character doesn't learn anything. She doesn't react to the way her civilization works at the beginning or at the end. She doesn't change. Nothing develops. And it's like, okay, this either could have been a middle grade because you could have written this for a slightly younger audience and just had the adventure part, or you could have written this as an adult and had higher stakes. And either way, it would have worked. But what you've done here is so the bare minimum that I just gave it 3 stars because I was like, I don't care. Like, nothing changes.
I've heard nothing but that about that book, and it's such a pity because it sounds
on my TBR this month.
Molly loved it, and they're reading This Poison Heart this month because we've got it as an arc. So you might love it, but for me, as someone who really heavily digs into character stuff, it just didn't work for me at all.
Well, I'll have to see how it goes. It was all depending on stuff anyway. So,
are there any more tabbed sections?
There are loads. because I keep taking you on tangents. So
Tangents are fun. Feels like we're
I tell
on
you
a
what,
team.
I'll run through the list, and you can tell me what you want to discuss next. So we
Feels like
have.
you're sounding toxic and trying to get us back on again, like QI.
I'm Alan.
No, if anything, I'm Alan, let's be honest. Even though I'm hosting this, I'm Alan, because I'm the one that's like, oh, this funny noise, let's go do that. Anyway, okay, so we've got Ma and police brutality. We've got the scene where Spring-Heeled Jack calls dibs, which I found very amusing. We've got the faceless ones in the desert I wanted to discuss because there's something in that I think would be really, really interesting. The Midnight Hotel. Now, Becca, you asked us to keep an eye out for any pop culture references.
Yeah.
Now, I have looked it up, and this came out before John Wick did.
Yeah.
But to me, the Midnight
John Wick.
Hotel and the Continental, exact
Identical.
same place. Exact same place.
Absolutely. It's one of my favourite tropes going. I love it. Just so much. Just this idea of having a completely neutral space where it doesn't matter what side you're on, what war's going on, if you're in this place, you are not allowed to murder each other.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So have either of you seen John Wick? Yeah.
I've seen a movie.
You've seen a movie? Okay, so Ali, for context, John Wick is an assassin. He is the world's best assassin. He's known as the boogeyman, whatever. Anyway, there is this place called the Continental, which is basically where all the assassins go to. Like, they're in different cities, but it's where they are basically safe. You're not allowed to kill each other whilst you're on territory of that. It's like a sanctuary place. And obviously, if you're cast out of there, you're in big trouble. And if you break the rules, you're in even bigger trouble. So it's very, very similar to the Midnight Hotel because obviously what is the name of the guy that runs it?
Anton Shudder.
Yes. Yeah, Shudder is just like, he's not going to have it if you like mess about. And I just really, really enjoyed that. And I literally wrote the Continental of this universe is just because I just thought it was a really clever idea of like, yeah, anyone can stay here. And then having the vampire stay there at the end and be like, yeah, you can stay here for as long as you like. You can help out and work here. Just don't kill anyone. Love that.
I love how chill Anton is about all of it as well. Like, yeah, I've got a whole ton of murderers and remnants in here, but we're going to carry on.
He was literally like, vampire, and Skulldugger was like, vampire that I fucked up their life. And I was like, all right, get on there.
Yeah.
Literally, it was just like, oh, it's lightsaber, sure.
Bless you. And then the last thing is the fact that Scarab and Sanguine are father and son.
Yeah. I forgot that again.
I forgot it as well.
I reread it and went, wait a minute, I do it every time.
I'm pretty sure, didn't you message me and just be like, and I was like, they are? Like flipping back. And then there was something that she put in her fucking vlog. Becca, by the way, I'm pointing around.
I assumed it was Becca you were talking about, yep.
In her, so she does spoiler-filled vlogs every time, every book. So I was like, yes, I'll watch this. And I got confused as shit. And I was like, Scapegrace is related. What? Scapegrace is not related to anybody. I messaged her. I was like, what are you doing? What have you done to me?
I need to learn to enunciate. I'm so sorry.
I thought she was saying that Scapegrace was related to them. And I was like, how?
Could you imagine Sanguine and Scapegrace as brothers?
I absolutely could. And that is a buddy cop movie I would watch in a heartbeat.
It wouldn't last 30 seconds because Sanguine would just turn around and stab him in annoyance. And
that's the thing, is imagine if they were brothers and Scarab was like, yes, your brother is a fuck up, but he is family and you have to protect him.
It turned into the Hitman's bodyguard.
You would still stab him. Just only mildly.
Yeah, mildly stabbed.
Like, as in, just to be like, you've annoyed me, here's a wound.
Yeah.
I feel like he'd get a whole load of, like, thumbtacks and just stab him with those and be like, well, he won't die with this, but it'll get out the frustration.
Right, I confirmed this with Becca. Zombie. Right. So, I would imagine he would just unravel him.
Yes!
Just pull at bits. And
Well, the
just
thing is,
have him
he
come
became a
apart.
zombie because he was expendable. So they were like, right, we'll make him a zombie to make a whole bunch of other zombies. And then it's just like, you had one job, don't let them eat anything. And what did he do? He found the worst lieutenant possible who let them eat whatever they wanted.
Leave Thrasher alone.
Oh, Thrasher.
This is adorable.
Nothing thrashing about him. But yeah, so those are the other things I wanted to talk about. I mean, the police brutality bit, I've kind of already covered. That, for me, especially because of how early on it is in the book, was the bit where I was just kind of like, this is for kids. You know? Like, that was the torture fine, like, because, like, skullduggery was tortured in the earlier books. But I guess there's something... to me, it was just kind of like... Go on.
See, I wouldn't have even, especially as a kid, I wouldn't have even connected Detective Mara as a cop. She's just like a character to me. So that's why, like, the police brutality, like, we recognize that because it's been such a prevalent issue and stuff lately. But as a kid, I think you just think of her as just being a bitch.
I can tell you
Like-
that is exactly what I thought. I didn't think police brutality, I just thought fucking cow.
I was like, oh, that's the thing that like, it's when she's just like, say you understand, and I was like, bitch, I'll kill you myself. Like,
Considering Landy, white man in Ireland, so obviously, like, police brutality is a thing everywhere, but like, not quite to the year. This was written in 2010. And, like, when you read it with an adult gaze, that's clearly his intent with Mar. Like, as a kid, didn't pick up on that one iota. I was just like, she's a cow, let's move on. But, like, that was 100% his intent. And this was written over a decade ago. And I find that interesting, because obviously at the time, I was a child. So I wasn't considering police brutality. I am a white child in the UK. I didn't need to think about it at the time.
yeah, that's fair enough. That's fair enough.
I'm also in the northeast, mainly in a countryside area. I'm fine. I'm white and in the countryside. Like, nothing's gonna happen.
I mean, we've all seen Hot Fuzz. We know what your police are like.
Yeah,
exactly. But
I also live in hot fuzz country, so definitely.
Yeah.
But just the fact that was written in 2010, it's like, it's just like little things like that. It's like, oh, that's actually quite clever. Like, and that he put that in, and it's something that, like, I was raised by my books. Like, 100% I was raised by my books. I'm an only child. We used to move around all the time. I never had, like, a set group of people that was around me. And my parents are busy people. So I was raised by my books. And it's things like this, like that, being put into a book but not being explained isn't a bad thing, because it means that the second I was then told, no, this happens and it's targeted towards these groups of people, my brain just went, okay, that's shit, but okay, that is a fact, fine, cool. Because I was raised on shit like this, where it's just like in there as a fact, because it is a fact. But like, there's none of this like, oh, it's for children, don't, like, they don't explain it, they don't say, this is police brutality, she is being biased, because like, it's just there. And because of things like that, as well as other stuff in loads of other books, it then just meant that me and probably loads of other people have been exposed to the fact that it's still... And I just went, oh, fuck, oh, that.
Oh. Yeah.
And I just think that, like, having that is in that way is really important. Like, it's really important, obviously, to get the representation from the people who are being marginalized, primarily, you know, BIPOC voices, BAME voices. But the fact that a white guy in 2010 put it in his book and made no fuss about it, then will mean that other white kids are going to read it. Yeah. Like, it's not like, look at this police brutality, like The Hate You Give. Like, fantastic, amazing book. One, American focus, so not quite as good for any British or Irish kids. And then two, that is very much look at the bullshit. Yeah. Whereas this, you wouldn't think of it, but it still gives you technically the same message.
Yeah, it's far more subliminal, and it's contextualized differently. And because it isn't the focus, it's just enough, because it's not that police brutality is a generic thing. I think with The Hate You Give, any cop is a threat. Whereas in this one, it's not any cop is a threat. She works with the police. She works with detectives. This one in particular, and the last one she works with, were both awful. Like, the fact that the book basically starts with Crux breaking into her place as well. Like, they are particular detectives, but it is going to become a point where
the system doesn't protect. Like, yeah, sure, the system should protect people from someone trying to break into their house and strangle them to death. But it doesn't, especially not when the people who are doing it are in the system.
Yeah, exactly.
And she had to get outside help to stop it as well.
Yeah,
So
because no one from the Sanctuary was going to do anything.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, because
So
they want island for themselves, which I think is a really interesting, like, addition to the world kind of thing.
Yeah. But yeah, it's very interesting that it's like, I don't even know if Landy did it on purpose or not. There is a chance that he did it subconsciously, but it's just the fact that it's in there, and when you analyze it like an English teacher, it's obvious. But when you're just reading it without the analysis, it isn't like police brutality, corrupt system. It's just like, oh, those are dicks.
I really enjoy that Molly's response to something was tee-hee-hee. I don't know what we were talking about when it was that, but I hope it wasn't police brutality.
That might just be her response to the fact that I told her this probably wouldn't be more than an hour.
Oh yeah, and an hour and 15 minutes later, we are still here.
Okay, are there any other tabs?
No, I've taken all my tabs out. We're tabless now.
Then, me and Becca now sit quietly whilst you and Ali say, what are you expecting from book number 5?
Okay, so book number 5 has what's his face? Bane from Batman in it. So that's gonna be interesting.
Sorry, he's got a very cool name to me. When you read it, you'll figure out why.
Also Gandalf.
I forgot about that.
And I think that's Springhill Jack, isn't it?
Wait. Show me Gandalf again. Who's Gandalf?
I don't know. Because again, this is the other thing, is like your blurb is so much longer than mine. Also, I love this. So no response, just popping in. I've read a whole lot of smut while you've been gone. Not surprised.
We love it. We were just talking about smut. You missed it.
2 seconds ago. Right. The fact that, you know, like Headless Horseman, but the horses are also headless. That's grim. But this is the thing. So my blurb is tiny. So I don't know if you've got a slightly longer blurb. Mine is...
I do.
With Valkyrie struggling to protect her dark secret, Skullduggery and the gang are more vulnerable than ever, just as a plague of body-snatching remnants are released upon the world. So...
Are you ready for the long one?
Please!
Settle in.
Story time!
Skullduggery Pleasant... Oh, yeah, man! Shh. I'm reading.
Good work.
Skullduggery Pleasant is back, but all is not well in the magical community. For one thing, there's an unstoppable assassin with a metal mask on the loose. And for another, Valkyrie has discovered that she's Darkess, the evil sorceress set to destroy the world. The problem is, she doesn't feel that she can tell Skullduggery what she's learned, and so she must try to change her terrible destiny alone. But the price of changing her destiny is high, and if she fails, she'll die alone too. With Valkyrie on her own quest, Skullduggery and the gang are even more vulnerable, which is a shame, as the necromancers have a body-snatching remnant that they're about to release. When no one is who they seem, when she can't trust her friends, and her enemies are closing in from all around her, the only thing Valkyrie can do is run.
Interesting.
That's the original synopsis from release. And it's
There's so much more in that. So, okay, so this
is also the original
cover. Are involved with the remnant.
It's a limited edition cover.
Swanky.
My mum worked at W.H. Smith's, so I got them as soon as they released. That's why I have all the hardbacks. It's because my mum worked there, so she got a discount. But yeah, so, well, we're told near the end of the book that the remnant, like, it's, again, I don't know if I'm saying this from, obviously, having the knowledge, because I've read the books, but they ask, the necromancers request the soul capture with a remnant in it. And I remember even as a kid being like, that's sus. I mean, this was back in 2010, so I didn't say sus, but you know.
Can we talk about this redacted acknowledgements page?
Oh yeah. Have you
I absolutely love.
have you been reading all the acknowledgements? They're absolutely hilarious.
They're amazing.
Like, it's Derek Landy's sense of humour all over. You can really see where the jokes in the books come from just from those acknowledgements.
Thing is, like,
It makes me mad that I don't know it.
Derek Landy is skullduggery, right? Their sense of humour is one and the same, but it's just the this book is dedicated with great reluctance to my editor, Nick Lake, because he is forcing me to. Personally, I would like to have included Gilly Russell and Michael Stearns, who, along with Nick, really welcomed me into the publishing world of my first book. Unfortunately, because Nick is now my sole editor, he has threatened to edit this dedication down to an unrecognisable mess of blacked out lines, and so as a result, this is dedicated to him and him alone. Personally, I think that this shows a staggering amount of redacted and redacted, which proves that Nick is nothing but a really long redacted bit with redacted for redacted. But hey, that's just my personal opinion.
I think that was shit for brains, just personally.
Yeah.
Quite shit for brains. And then here, Nick, you finally get a book dedicated to you. Hope you're fucking happy, dickhead.
Yeah.
There's redacted in there, clearly.
Yeah. So here, Nick, you finally get a book to hope you're redacted happy. Redacted. Editor's note, Nick Lake is a great guy.
You can tell that everyone who works on these books has the best time. And I love that you can really see that.
The one for Dark Days at the end of it, it's to, I think it's his best friend? Yeah. Possibly partner, I don't know. But just Laura, best friend, is how she's referred to. And then at the end, you're my best friend and my muse, and I owe you a lot. So I'm assuming she's Val. Brackets. A lot being, of course, entirely figurative, and in no way implies that you're getting a share of the royalties. I think Derek is Gordon.
I think Derek's somewhere between skullduggery and Gordon in that sort of, like, self-insert the writer.
When I
really want a conversation. I really hope it happens in this book because it hasn't happened yet. I really want a conversation between Gordon and Skullduggery Pleasant because we know they're friends, but I want to see them talk to each other.
So this is the short story collection, and the short stories change, like, they go throughout the timeline of the book, and there is a timeline. My post-its are for the World Book Day books because, yeah. So there is one in here. Which one is it? It is before the setting of the first book. It's the second short story. So anyone can read it because it's technically before the first book starts. And that is, the title is The Horror Writers Halloween Ball. And that is Gordon is invited to the Horror Writers Halloween Ball and takes Skullduggery along as his +1.
Oh.
And so they go, and they have to be in costume. And Gordon's costume is fantastic.
I love that.
Like, yeah, so like there are stories that are out there that include that. There's also a Wild West story in here.
Why not? Why
It was
not?
the very first one. It was quite fun.
I love that.
Quite enjoyable.
Cool. So I think we leave it there. And then just I can go and start reading this now. Because it's chunky.
This one, if you guys are wanting, if you own it, if you're going to, I don't even know if Ali, if you can get access to this in any format other than digital. I don't know if they've released them in.
I will check.
I get all of my books are coming from Hannah.
You're pointing to Hannah.
I was trying to point.
I was just like
checked, and this one we can read after Mortal Coil.
Okay.
It has to be after, but it can be read after. So if you intend to read it, it's really short. It's 101 pages precisely of shorter pages, and I've read it. I'm the only one out of you that's read it. It doesn't spoil anything. To the point where when I went back and read it, I hadn't started the reread yet. So I picked it up and I was like, this is so much fun to be back in the old world, because obviously things progress. So to go back to this old world with this set of like plot lines, that's why I started rereading the books with you guys, because of this, and it's really fun.
Oh, I thought it was just me nagging at you to join in.
Well, you nagged, and then I read this, and it was the combination, and I was like, oh fuck. So here I am.
Good.
But yeah, so
Do
if you
either
want
of
to
you
read it,
enjoy YA fantasy with romancy fun times.
Romancy fun times.
It depends on the romance.
Enemies to
Stop
lovers.
dancing and tell us.
And enemies to lovers. Good time. I wanted to reread the Poison Study series, so I made Hannah co-host a read along with me.
I mean, again, wasn't much of a stretch. Ali was like, I'm
No,
going to
it
do this. And I
wasn't.
was like, can we start in July? Because I have time. And Ali was like, yes. And I was like, count me in.
You can force me to do this if you do it on my schedule.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that is, I'm not going to lie. You can force me to do a lot of things if you're happy to pander to my ridiculous schedule. Because I don't know if you know this. I like to bite off more than I can chew. So, yeah.
Really? I never heard that about you.
I know. I try and keep it on. It's low key, but
Keep it low key.
I've
Is it
got
low
like
key?
4 books. Ha ha! Like that.
No, I wasn't.
Oh no! That works brilliantly and they don't even know! Loki! Him!
Yeah! I've got you.
Oh, is that his name?
No,
Oh,
you'll get it when you
confused.
read it.
okay. Right, I'm calling it here.
Not very foreign.
No, it's fine. Oh my god, it's now perfect. We're reading in the perfect month as well. Oh, you've just made me so happy. That just made my day.
Right, Becca. If you could be coherent for like 2 seconds, is there anything you want to promote whilst you're here?
Check out the Comic Book Sanctum, which is my website dedicated to Marvel Comics, and my TikTok, Speed Book Sanctum, where I just talk a lot about Marvel, essentially. So if you want more reactions like that, that's where it is.
Yeah, good. Ali.
I exist.
Okay, right. Ali also has a read along starting soon, so keep an eye out with that. Go check out her channel. Do that. Abby.
I have possibly the most embarrassing video I have ever filmed and created going up tomorrow at 7 p.m.
Can't
British
wait.
time. It's atrocious.
Great.
I've had one person watch it and she's told me it's the worst thing she's ever seen and that the world deserves it. So it's going live at 7 p.m.
Yeah.
This sounds amazing.
And Molly would like to just plug themselves. So. Right. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next month, if not before.